Chapter 12. Drifting into a meditative twilight sleep, Root murmured a request to the universe. Show me. The phrase was a traditional prompt, used by navigators since the early years of dirt history. As Root's subconscious mind wandered like incense smoke over her past and present journey, it decided to take pity on her. Root's deep, veiled mind knew that soon, due to the law of proximity, her far-seen sessions with the familiars would be less frequent and need more interpretation. Much like the details lost when waking up and reaching for the light to write down a dream. How can we lose our grip on something so vivid so fast? Why, and where does it go? Root barely thought as she sank further into 10 space. But then Harper's inescapable training mingled with Root's questions, perking up her analytical mind. A memory revisited is a memory rewritten. With the thought of that old Ucham and how close they had become, she sat up, yawned, and abandoned her idle, introjetic musings. Instead, she consciously decided to play the game she had invented to help her communicate with Nips and her other familiars. It reinforced the same ability Root routinely used to enter their bodies, and the same one Nips had used to force Root into her winged frame. She had named it Far-Seeing Heads-Up 7-Up. Sitting erect, Root shook her upper body as if prepping for a dance class. Multi-locationality, projection of one's consciousness into another, or far-seeing, requires aggressive, disciplined attention to sensory information. In other words, it was all business, not pleasure. Well, except for today. This was pure play. Root went for the low-hanging fruit first, her trusty bodyguard, Fella. She focused on purposeful breathing and imagined her blue flame, passing between his neurons and synapses. Then she called out to him, in word and thought. And like magic, Fella looked up from his kibble. Let's just say that his energetic gait was never latched. He tilted his head, feeling her presence, a nugget of dry food falling from his slack muzzle. He was a simple guy, and today he was all in. For him, her asking would be silly. For her, not asking would be rude. With her consciousness split between the train cabin and his furry noggin, Root reached for the sensations of his body, stance, fur, and odor, all that encapsulated his dogness. Her memory and imagination worked together, the sensory keys turning simultaneously, like a psychic two-woman rule. And with that, Root's body memory slid out of her and poured into Fella's wild form. She fell from 2 legs, melting down and out into 4 and sprouting hair everywhere. Fella gave a quick shake to settle her in, and then let out a bark so she could feel his bravado. As Root co-occupied his body, he could feel his mind shift. At that moment, he was uplifted and enlightened as their souls were emulsified by Root's magic. Fella's pure, loving, yet straightforward doggy intellect expanded. It now temporarily encompassed linguistics, enough for him to acknowledge her, feel safe, and be able to say, "Root! Hi, Root! Hi! Walk, run, rubs, tell me. Root, just say it. Tell me. I love you, Root." Sometimes she worried it wasn't fair, hijacking her familiar senses, feeling their feelings. But they had tossed her out before, especially Moo, that damn cat. She could feel the spike of adrenaline in Fella's system, making him dance in a circle. Casa turned from her meal prep, chopping, to raise eyebrows at him. "Root? Fella, is she here, boy? Huh?" Casa asked. dusting the minced onions from her hands. But she jogged to the door and pulled it open quickly regardless, just in case that had been his need-to-poop dance instead. Casa watched as he ran and ran, vanishing into the green sea. Smiling, she returned to her daily routine. As Fella galloped through the grass and bushes, the experience was bittersweet for Root, because somewhere in his spirit, mixed with his pure joy for living, was a feeling that if he could run fast enough, far enough, he could reach her. And that thought brought up the ever-present reality that soon, much too soon, Fella will be an old man doggy and die. The sudden lurch into sad emotions made a confused Fella slide to a halt, throwing Root right out of him like a bucking bronco. Her retrocausal grief had muddled the psychic connection. But instead of cramming back inside him, Root moved on to Moo. But her touch remained. Bye, Root. Wait, you're leaving? Wait. Gone but still a whiff? How? Love you, Root. Back in the house, Moo felt a sudden pressure on her slick black forehead. Yawning and stretching awake in indifferent luxuriating, she looked around for Root like Fella had, but realized Root had just asked to come in. Yes, but for a fee, Dirt, Moo told her, reluctantly getting up. Root smiled, eyes still closed. Okay, fine. It's inside the wicker basket, but don't knock everything over just to... She slid into the little demon's mind just in time to watch her do the opposite of Root's caveat. Moo smacked Root's kid-keeper watch, all her loose change, a mint tin, and the entire wicker basket of potpourri onto the floor. Methodically, mind you. One by one, so Root could watch but do nothing, mind you. She jumped down and fished her catnip-filled trophy for most extortive familiar out of the pine cones, cinnamon sticks, and cloven oranges, all to mask its telltale smell and keep her on the straight and narrow. Huffing her toy, Moo gnawed at the canvas mouse, her eyes drooping. Root could feel the weedy, heady rush and disassociation flooding her little cat brain. That meant Moo would be extremely disoriented in a hot second, and Root would get shut out when Moo slammed her mental bedroom door. Ugh, you are such a lost cause, you lazy, good-for-nothing niphead. Root left, but gifted Moo that playful admonishment as she drooled and contorted on top of an aromatic heap of autumn cheer. But Root's spirit remained. Back in the forest, Fella was at full tilt now, and his legs felt amazing. Being so close to the ground, smelling all the smells. Sometimes it was good, other times super gross, which also super good. Cutting left, he plowed through the tall grass, shark style, pulling up just short of the water's edge. Ducks, of course, Root thought with a chuckle. As Fella waded a few feet out and barked in impish delight, Root fought to keep anchored to him and a high moo. As she focused on taking deep, slow breaths, Root fractalized her consciousness and spirit again, trying to link up with Nips. Eyes still closed, she stood and blindly turned towards the cold glass of the window. Gripping the edge of the windowsill, an accumulation of ten sweat was prickling her scalp and lower back with metabolites and plant energy. Suddenly, Root's third astral phantom limb was smashed like a clay model, then speed sculpted into Nip's elegant airborne frame. Going from standing steady in a civilized train to a high-speed barrel roll was jarring, to say the least. But crags, did it feel so dangerously delicious. Root fought to inhale as the air rushed past her beak. Like an asthmatic, Root had to slow down her breathing in the train compartment as sensations from all three familiars were swirling in her mind's eye. Nips felt Root's unspoken question and looked down for a fraction of a second. Long enough, though, for Root to realize that Nips was over the bowl. Far above the bowl, actually. And currently in a holding pattern above the hub's launch tower, with an enormous black spaceship floating nearby. Nips had followed Root the entire bus ride from Florida to New Houston. My sweet General, thank you, Root thought to her fellow navigator, as Nips winked a yes ma'am in recognition. No hands to salute, you see. Just then, Nips buzzed a flock of honking geese, making Root laugh in surprise at the noisy Canadians. Back to business, Nips dropped a wing and piloted her guest down to the surface of the spaceship that would soon take Root far away. When they leveled off, Root noticed the thousands of pigeons. They had peppered the weather deck with nests and mounds of tuxedo-themed poop. But she figured all that would burn off when the ship jumped into hyperspace. Still, though, nasty. As they glided over the outer shell, Root spotted the massive bridge window. She nudged Nips towards it, hoping to glimpse a bot or two. Show me, Root said to the racing raven as she banked and soared through the forest of antennas and sensors. Suddenly, behind her train-bound body, a young male voice called out to Root.